froze. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are back with episode number 35 of the Facts Over Feelings podcast. And Trevor, a lot went on over this last week. I feel like it's been a really long week. We had the NFL wildcard weekend. What a whirlwind of games! 6 games this past weekend, and I feel like they were a pretty solid slate of games. Some of them weren't, quite as entertaining as I would have liked, but overall it was a pretty good weekend, pretty fun weekend. Some upsets occurred, some teams won as we expected them to. So Trevor, I wanted to start off by getting right into that. Moving off of all these games from this past weekend, I kind of wanted to talk about the games coming up for this next weekend. We got 4 games coming up, and I wanted to know your predictions for these upcoming games. So Trevor, you want to talk about the Packers and the
Yeah,
Rams game this weekend?
I would be happy to start with that game, Ryan. This is going to be an intriguing game, actually, and here's why. Defense travels in the playoffs. When it's cold
Mm.
and Green Bay, it's going to be really cold this time of year. Offense might be affected a little bit, but defense will travel. And what do the Rams do better than anybody in the NFL? They play defense. I will say they are going to be a little bit beat up. Jared Goff is hurt. John Wolford, who all of a sudden looks better than Jared Goff, small sample size, but he looked good in the little time he played.
He
He's
did.
banged up. Cooper Kupp is banged up. I don't know if I already mentioned, or no, Aaron Donald is banged up as well. It looks like most of them are going to play. I believe Donald and Cooper Kupp are going to play.
Mm.
So for me, the Rams are going to keep this close. It's going to be a tough game for Green Bay, but I do think ultimately the rest and playing at home will benefit the Packers. So I have them winning a close football game here, 27-23.
Mm.
I will say the Rams' recipe to win this game is the same as their last 2 wins, right? Against my Cardinals week 17, they got a defensive touchdown and a safety. Against Seattle, they got a defensive touchdown.
Mm.
And they were able to run the ball really effectively. Cam Akers played great in that wild card game against the Seahawks. So if the Rams are able to control the ball or maybe make something happen on defense like they have the last couple of weeks, then they have a shot. But I do think Aaron Rodgers and Green Bay, with the rest and the discipline they have, they're going to avoid those big mistakes. So I do think the Packers will take this in a close one.
Trevor, you bring up a really good point, talking about the Rams and, how they definitely do have a chance to win this game, if they stick to their guns and, keep it on the ground, keep it, long drives and keep it away from Aaron Rodgers, right? And Devontae Adams. Those are the 2 guys you got to keep it away from. It'll be really fun to watch, Trevor, the Jalen Ramsey and Devontae Adams one-on-one matchup this weekend. That's going to be a lot of fun to watch because they're both maybe the both best at their position, honestly. And I think it's going to be a close game. I do agree with that. I think that the emergence of Cam Akers has really helped the Rams because now they can really go with a more ground and pound kind of approach. And before that, they didn't really have anyone who could do that. Darrell Henderson was okay. Malcolm Brown really is there for the veteran presence and for like pass protection. He's not really there for, dynamic runs, between the tackles. So Cam Akers' emergence has really, really helped this team. And Goff didn't look him. Goff isn't a great quarterback, but I feel like he didn't look himself this past weekend. Nonetheless, like he just looked really off. He was the emergency quarterback, and I think part of him didn't really expect the play. And clearly, that we saw why he really did struggle. Completing like less than 50% of his passes. So all in all, I do agree with you, Trevor. It's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a little more low scoring than you had. I think the final score is going to be more along the lines of like 24-16. I think the Packers will prevail. I just think Aaron Rodgers is going to be a little too much. I just think that they're too dynamic of an offense, and I think Green Bay's defense is solid enough to stop this, mediocre at best, Rams offense, I would say. So I think the Packers are going to edge this game out, but it'll be a really fun, grindy game to watch. And one more thing, Trevor, before I move on, I just want to say one quick thing. I know some people, Trevor, and this may be only the people that I've talked to and the people that I've seen online and in general, but a lot of people say that, like, that Seahawks Rams game was so messy. And it's like, I just want to dispel this narrative that like it's necessarily all that messy. It's like it was just a very defensive game. And just because a game is very defensive minded and it's a very big defensive battle doesn't necessarily mean it's like a not an exciting game or a talent, like there's not a lot of talent or a lot of good plays happening. Like there's still really talented defenders making plays, and that's what's happening in the game. So I just feel like people who say that the game's just like it's just a mess, like, oh my gosh, like the defense is just dominating. Well, maybe the defense is just really, really good and they're executing really well. So I just kind of wanted to say that, but I think this game against the Packers will be a fun one.
Now, you bring up a great point about the whole idea of it being a messy game. And to
Yeah.
put things into perspective, the Rams and the Seahawks already played each other twice, right? They know everything they're going to do. So,
Mm.
of course, that game is going to be a bit of a grind fest, a bit of an uglier matchup. That's how divisional games are. I mean, look at the Cleveland Pittsburgh game. That game
Yep.
was messy, but it was just a really high scoring, messy game. We'll talk
Mm.
about that game and the Browns' chances against KC a little bit later. But back to the Rams, you're right. That game wasn't maybe the most offensively beautiful display we've ever seen, but it was an entertaining football game.
Mm.
And for me, Sean McVay just completely outcoached Pete Carroll. I mean, Cam Akers ran all over that Seattle defense. And I think getting Andrew Whitworth back, who will be a future Hall of Famer, was huge for the Los Angeles Rams on the offensive line.
Yep.
But Seattle had no defense, or excuse me, had no answer for that running game of
They
the Los
didn't.
Angeles Rams. And that's ultimately why they lost. They were able to control the clock, and their defense made a play or two. And that's how the Rams are going to win football games. And that's how they will have to continue to win football games if they want to keep their season alive.
Without a doubt, I agree, Trevor. And with that, I wanted to move on to the next game coming up this weekend, and I wanted to talk about the Buccaneers and the Saints, Trevor. And this is gonna be a fun one. I think. I think it's the battle of two QBs who are at the very very end of their careers, trying to look for one last ride off into the sunset, maybe end on a Super Bowl win and retire. But so this is a matchup between Tom Brady and Drew Brees, Trevor. And I wanted to ask you, who's going to win this matchup?
Yeah, I look. I'm really tempted to go
Back and
Tampa Bay
forth.
here for all the reasons that you're probably thinking of already, Ryan.
Mm,
And you know what? I'm going to stick to it. I do
okay.
think for some reason the Saints have had Tampa's number in the regular season.
Mm,
But for me, having to beat the same team 3 times in one season, especially when they're as good as Tampa, is really, really hard to do. And for the Saints, they're not going to have any home field advantage, right? COVID, there's
mm.
going to be very few fans in the stands. So for me, I think Tampa Bay is going to win this game, and I think Tom Brady has a lot to prove. He seems to always find a second gear in January, and look, they played good against Washington last week. I don't think they played great. I really think their defense is a little bit of a concern, but I think the emergence of Antonio Brown has really made this Tampa Bay offense impossible. I mean, they don't have much of a run game right now. Their run game is average, but this passing attack, who are you going to guard? You can guard Mike Evans, okay. You can guard Chris Godwin, okay. Well, then you have a third All-Pro receiver in Antonio Brown and a
Yeah.
Hall of Fame tight end in Rob Gronkowski. So this air raid is deep, and it's very, 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 what's the word, dynamic.
Mm.
And for me, the Saints offense, there's just something missing. Breeze has not looked the same all year. And again, they've already beaten Tampa Bay twice. I think the fortune is on the Buccaneers side, and I think they win this game 28-20.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, I do agree with you in some aspects. I think that Drew Brees definitely has struggled this year. And here's the thing, Trevor, he's just struggled to throw the ball down the field, right? So it's the same issue that Ben Roethlisberger has had this year, and he hasn't had big plays down the field. Drew Brees hasn't had big plays down the field. I mean, it's clearly, coming with age, like we saw with Peyton Manning on the Broncos in the last season. His defense kind of carried him to the Super Bowl, and his arm just wasn't there anymore. I mean, your arm just goes away at a certain age, and very few quarterbacks can, keep up their arm strength, in their late 30s or early 40s. And clearly Drew Brees has kind of lost some of that. So they've had to modify their offense. So they're throwing a lot to Alvin Kamara. They're throwing a lot to, tight ends and receivers within the first 10 yards, right, of the line of scrimmage. They're not throwing down the field at all. And it's good that Michael Thomas will be back for this game. And hopefully he's at full strength, Trevor, because they need him. They really, really do. They need a guy who can reliably catch the ball at the receiver position, short passes, those slants and those outs, as people make fun of Mike Evans for not really being like necessarily a big play receiver, more a possession receiver, but that's exactly what they need to win this game. So I think that this game's going to be pretty close. I think the Saints defense is solid. I think it's been good for a few years now. I think Marshawn Lattimore is a very good corner. I think that they have a solid linebacking core and D line. And I think they'll cause Tom Brady some problems. But I do agree, Tom Brady kind of hits a second gear come the playoffs. And this offense, Trevor, I really don't see any weaknesses. This O-line has been very nice this year. Ronald Jones looks like he's going to be good to go for this game. So that's going to be a bonus in the run game. And then you have this passing attack, which you highlighted, in all aspects. And it's just absolutely elite. even with the injury of OJ Howard. I mean, they have everyone else stepping up for early in the season, and they've just been absolutely sensational. The receiving core is probably the best trio in football. There's not really anything else to say about those three receivers. So, I think at the end of the day, I think Tampa is going to kind of ride the momentum they had from last week and win this game. I think it's going to be actually a little more high scoring than you think. I think it's going to be more of like a 35-27 type of game. I think that the Saints are going to try to battle back late in the game, but it's not quite going to be enough.
We'll see. I don't think either team's going to get to 30 in this game. I do think New Orleans defense is good enough to keep them under 30, but you make a fair point. One more point on this game. Ronald
Yeah.
Jones did not practice on Wednesday. We'll see if he's good to go on Sunday. He's not, in my opinion, that big of a loss because they have Fournette and they have an unbelievable passing attack. Just a small little thing. I think the more important injury for Tampa Bay is Devin White. Or excuse me, they actually weren't injured. They returned from COVID-19
Yeah.
list. They should be able to go.
Yep.
So I think that will be huge for their defense to get Devin White back. But Ryan, if you don't have any more on this game, we'd like to move on to our third game. And this is not in chronological order of when they play. The Tampa New Orleans game is Sunday night.
Yep.
This is the early game on Sunday, the Browns and the Chiefs. I know, Ryan, you have a lot to say about this game, and I'm sure you're riding that high after a huge playoff win last Sunday night at Pittsburgh. But what are your thoughts on how the Browns will fare against the huge favorites in KC?
So Kansas City is one of the few places, Cleveland as well, where they're allowing like a pretty substantial number of fans. So the fans will be a little bit of a factor, I think, come Sunday. It's only around, I think, 15, maybe 20,000. I don't know the exact number. But that amount of fans in KC Stadium, those fans are notoriously pretty loud. I think that's going to have some sort of impact on the game, even if it's minuscule. So that's something to remember. But I think this game's going to be closer than most people think. The Browns get back Kevin Stefanski, their head coach, which is obviously very important. And they also get back their all-pro corner in Denzel Ward. And Denzel Ward is a very, very key piece that they have missed in the past few weeks. Because the Browns don't have a lot of their secondary healthy, especially with Ward out. They had their second corner and Kevin Johnson hurt. They have Grant Delpit, who's been out for the year, their safety they drafted in the second round, and Andrew Sendejo was also out with COVID. They've had a lot of these players out and hurt over the course of these last few weeks, and to get Denzel Ward back here is going to be very, very important for this team. And I think it's going to make a difference. I think this game's going to be close, but I think Kansas City's offense, Trevor, it's just too elite. Is just too elite. It really is. And especially coming off a lot of rest like this. And sometimes, Trevor, I think you want to make this point, but sometimes a little too much rest might be a little bit of a problem. But in this case, I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue for the Chiefs. I think they might get off to a kind of a slow start, and the Browns will keep up with them in scoring. The Browns offense is one of the best offenses in football. That's one of the best, if not the best, running attack in football in rush yards per game. And they proved against Pittsburgh why they're so good. Pittsburgh, Trevor, has a very good defense. I mean, they are a little injured, right? Devin Bush is hurt, Badu Dupree is hurt, but they have an elite defense, Trevor. That front seven is really scary, and it caused the Browns problems back in the regular season. But they put up 48. They put up 48 points in the game on Sunday night. So, and that was in part due to Ben Roethlisberger's mistakes. But regardless, the point being, they couldn't really be stopped very much, and I think that's going to continue on Sunday. So my prediction, Trevor, is it's going to be Chiefs 45, Browns 35. It will be a very good game, but in the end, the Chiefs offense will prove to be a little bit too much.
We'll see. That's a really high scoring prediction for a playoff game. But this does have the hold or the play style to reach that type.
Yes, it does.
Role.
Yep.
For me, I don't want to say Cleveland's win was fluky because it's a playoff win, right? But is Kansas City going to turn the ball over 5 times? No. I mean, probably not. I don't think Cleveland's going to win the turnover margin by 5. I don't think the first play of the game is going to be a bad snap into the end zone recovered for a fumble, right? There was just crazy things that happened that allowed Cleveland to win that football game. They played good. I think they put a lot of heart into that game. And again, they're undermanned. So that is something to keep in mind. And they're only getting healthier, right, as the season goes later on because of all the COVID stuff at the end of the regular season. I think Kansas City will win this game fairly comfortably. I just think people are talking about, not people, but I just thought about this in my head. This is the Tennessee scenario of last year where Baltimore, number 1 seed, 14-2, They didn't play anybody week 17. Then they have wild card weekend off. So they haven't played a game for 3 weeks. Is that too much rest? We saw with Baltimore it was. I think with KC, they've been down this road before. They have plenty of playoff experience. Patrick Mahomes has won plenty of playoff games already in his young career. So I think Kansas City is going to be ready to play. They might get off to a slow start. I wouldn't be surprised, but Ryan made the point. Their offense is as close to unstoppable as there is in the National Football League. Even if they start slow, they'll make adjustments. They'll figure out a way to effectively get Mahomes going. They'll figure out a way to get whoever's playing a running back going. I mean, Kelsey's the best security blanket in football. So I agree with you. I do think this is going to be the highest scoring playoff game of the weekend. 45-35 for me is very, very high scoring. I just don't think it'll reach that high.
All right.
I'm going to go 37-28. I got KC winning this game, but Cleveland will cover. I think it's a -10 line right now, so Cleveland will cover that.
Is it really? Wow, that's that's interesting. That's a really, really big line for being a second round of the playoffs game. A 10-point Kansas City -10 is wow. That's very aggressive. I think this game's gonna be a very good game. I wanted to say one thing, Trevor. I wanted to say one thing. You say that the Browns won't be +5 in the turnover margin come Sunday. And that's probably,
they won't. Come on.
And that is definitely true, and definitely probably not going to happen. But you have to look at the Browns. You have to look at the Browns and realize that this team doesn't really turn the ball over. Right. So Baker Mayfield has, I'm
not saying they're going to turn the ball
over. Yeah,
over.
I know.
Kansas City ain't going to turn it over 5
Yes.
times.
So my point being is the Browns could very well win the turnover margin, and when they do, I believe that they're undefeated. And this could be a wrong stat, but I believe I saw that they were 12-0, including the Steelers' playoff win when they won the turnover margin. So if that's the case, we'll see what happens. And I think Kansas City, obviously makes not a lot of mistakes as well. Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback, the best player in the football. But I think that because the two offenses don't make a lot of mistakes, it's going to be a really close game, and I think they're going to continue to score and pile up points. So it'll be a fun game to watch.
I will say, and Kansas City isn't a great defensive football team.
Yep.
Browns can establish the run game early and chew up clock and keep Mahomes on the sidelines. They have a shot because in this situation, especially when Cleveland has a bad defense, right? And that secondary is pretty bad. They're getting Denzel Ward back, which is big for them, in my opinion.
Yep.
But sometimes your best defense is your offense. And if you can go on a 6-7 minute drive and eat up clock and make and get points out of it, then I think that's a win. And that's going to be how Cleveland's going to have to win this game. Just because Kansas City is so dynamic, they can score in a blur. So you have to limit the amount of chances they get to score. But Cleveland's got a really, really good running back duo, and they have a great offensive line. We'll see if Jack Conklin can give it a go. He did not practice on Wednesday. So I'm assuming it'll be a game time decision. I think he'll give it a go considering it's a divisional playoff game. But the Browns, if they can play their style of football, they have a shot. I just don't know. I'm not going to say the Pittsburgh win is fluky, right? But I just think there were things that happened in the Pittsburgh game that won't happen in the KC game.
Well, sure. And I wanted to say, well, listen, I think that it's big for the Browns if they can get Joel Bitonio back on that offensive line, who he had COVID going into this past playoff game. So that's going to be very important for the Browns. But, I mean, you're right. How did the Raiders, Trevor, how did the Raiders beat the Chiefs this season? They were basically the only team that beat them. I mean, the Chargers won, but they benched all their starters, the Chiefs did. So I really have a big asterisk around that win. How did the Raiders beat the Chiefs? They have the ball. They hold the ball for as long as possible, and they score at the end of those drives. The Raiders, Trevor, have the longest drives in the NFL. They hold the ball for the longest per drive in football. So that's how they won. They played their game. They held the ball for as long as possible and had slow, short passes and, moved the chains slowly, and they ended up winning the game because they just kept Mahomes off the field for long enough. So if the Browns can do that, you're right. They can win, and we'll see what happens. It'll be a fun game to watch, and I'm excited to watch it on Sunday. So
one more point on this game. There's a famous phrase I heard on a TV show that field goals get you 3 points closer to losing, right? So I think Kevin Stefanski, which I'm assuming he will, as an offensive-minded coach, is going to have to coach extremely aggressively, and no lead is too big of a lead, especially when playing Kansas City. 100%. So the Browns have to remain extremely aggressive on offense for 60 minutes. Yep. And they can, they have to get as many stops as they can on defense because I don't think they're going to stop KC all that much. We'll see. It's an intriguing matchup.
Yep.
Ryan, we are going to move on now to our final playoff game on the slate. And in my opinion, this is the hardest game for me to
Mm.
predict. I actually don't know who I think is going to win this game as we are filming this video. So I'll hand it
Wow.
off to you, Ryan, to give me some clarity on the Bills-Ravens game, my personal favorite of the weekend.
Yeah, so this game, Trevor, this is gonna be a great game, plain and simple. You're exactly right. It's gonna be a fun one. And to me, Trevor, look, the Bills are a great team. I love what McDermott has done with this team. He's really turned this organization around, and they've done a great job. Their defense is very good. Their offense, Josh Allen, has come into his own. And I think, Trevor, and this, I'm kind of getting off track a little bit, but I want to say this. A lot of fans can say, I wish my team drafted Josh Allen. I wish so and so drafted Josh Allen or any other player. But I want to point out that I think that Josh Allen going to the Bills, Trevor, was like the only or one of the only spots he could go and succeed. I think Josh Allen, had a lot of flaws coming in the NFL. He was told he wasn't accurate. He was told, he can't run as much as he did. He was told that
Mhm.
people who have a big arm are just that. Someone who just has a big arm, you can't actually complete passes and be efficient. But Josh Allen was able to work on that in Buffalo. And by year 3, he's become the quarterback he is now, an MVP candidate. So, I think that it's really remarkable watching his, kind of evolution into what he is now. And it's awesome. But I think that, Trevor, the Ravens are going to be too much for the Bills. I think that Lamar Jackson running the football is just simply too much. And there's not a lot of teams that can answer him. There's not a lot of teams that can slow him down. Not a lot of teams that can keep up with the scoring. And I don't think Buffalo will, because I think that Baltimore's defense, their secondary more specifically, is very, very, very solid. And I think that's going to slow down Josh Allen enough. He's still prone to a few INTs in a game. He still turns the ball over a little bit. And I think that's going to prove to be their downfall. I think that the Lamar is going to make less mistakes. He's going to know that he's not, he knows he's not a guy who throws the ball a ton, and he's just going to tuck it and run a lot of the time. J.K. Dobbins is going to, I think, have a very solid game with him. And, I think that it's going to be enough because Lamar's legs, Trevor, did you see that 50-yard run he had against the Titans? That right there is just, it makes you realize, like, Lamar is one of the most dynamic, if not the most dynamic player in all of football. It's just no one else can do that in the National Football League. And I think it's going to be a little too much for the Bills to handle. So at the end of the day, I think the Ravens defense is going to be a little better than the Bills defense because Lamar is too difficult to stop in the running game. And I think the Ravens will win this game by a score of 35-27.
Oof, that's
High scoring.
I agree with a lot of what you just said there. I think you make a very good argument.
Yeah.
And my argument for the Bills winning was, oh, they finally got the monkey off their back, right? They finally win a playoff game. It's been almost 30 years since they won a playoff game.
Sure.
Well, Lamar Jackson finally won his first playoff game too. So both of these teams, I feel like, are coming into this game with a
Mm-hmm.
big weight off their shoulder, which is why I think it's going to be such a high-level football game. And oof, I'm back and forth on this one. I think there's just a little magic with Buffalo this year.
Wow.
The connection with Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen has flourished into maybe the best quarterback receiver, duo in football. I mean, up there with Wilson, Metcalf, Mahomes, and Tyreek Hill, Rodgers, Adams. Those are probably the top 4 in my opinion. And I think the Bills playing at home, they'll let in enough fans to give the stadium a little bit of energy, but I do think they do feed off that crowd and the whole Bills Mafia a lot.
Mm.
But yeah, for me, I just feel like there's a little bit of magic with this Bills team. I feel like they're going to be playing a little bit more free than they did against the Colts. You could tell they were feeling the pressure against the Colts, right?
Mm.
They were trying to get that first playoff win at home in front of the crowd. And I think for Buffalo, that was a huge weight off their shoulders. And I think they are due for a big performance this weekend. I do think
Mm.
this is going to be a great game, though. Lamar Jackson is a problem. You can't stop him running the ball. And he's been throwing the ball, say what you want. He's been throwing the ball pretty well, down the stretch of this season. I think the big difference for me in this game is who's going to be able to, who's going to be able to take away whose strength. Is Buffalo going to be able to stop Baltimore's rushing attack,
Mm.
or is Baltimore going to be able to stop Buffalo's air raid? I don't know if maybe I got did I say, I think I said
No,
that
you
right.
did. You did.
Okay, good.
Yep.
So I think it's going to be about who takes away whose strength better.
Yep.
And I just think Josh Allen is playing hot. He's hot right now. Stephon Diggs is playing at an MVP level. And there's a little magic with the Bills. I'm going to go in a very, very close game. I'm going to go 30-27.
Mm.
I got the Bills by 3.
There you go. And I mean, hey, either team can win this game. As we both said, it's going to be a really entertaining game. And you can make a compelling argument for both. I just simply think that the Baltimore secondary is going to stop Josh Allen more than the Buffalo linebacking core and D line is going to stop Lamar. That's kind of what I think. But it's anyone's game, and this weekend's gonna be a lot of fun, Trevor, for the NFL. And are you okay if we move on to one last NFL topic?
Yeah, let's do
Or
it.
okay, we have one more NFL topic that I wanted to discuss, or we wanted to discuss for just a few minutes, and we talked about this last week a little bit, but I wanted to kind of touch on this because it is news. And the Philadelphia Eagles, after we talked about what happened in Week 17 and that whole fiasco, have fired Doug Pederson just a few days ago, and I think Trevor, this is really big news because I think a lot of organizations winning a Super Bowl with a coach just a few years ago, right, wouldn't make such a bold move to fire the head coach that won them that Super Bowl. And so I kind of applaud them for doing this because, not a lot of teams have the guts to do it. And I think it's going to help them have a refresh. And I think the player, hopefully the players will like the new coach that comes in because clearly, he lost the players from Week 17. So Trevor, I mean, do you have any general thoughts on this? Like good, bad? Were you surprised that they did this? Yeah.
I like the move.
Yeah.
I don't hate Doug Pederson though. I think he'll get another, at least an offensive coordinator job somewhere
He will.
on a roster. I think he did a really good job with
Mm.
this Eagles team a few years back, winning a Super Bowl, multiple playoff appearances, multiple division titles. But it got worse every year after the Super Bowl, and that's not what you like to see. And Carson Wentz's career got worse. They lose Nick Foles. They drafted Jalen Hurts was a good thing, but then obviously the Week 17 fiasco where they weren't even trying to hide it. They objectively were trying to lose that football game on purpose. And yeah, I just think that was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yep.
I don't think I don't think the locker room loved Peterson even before that game, but I think he completely lost it after that game.
Yep.
And I think it was a good move by the Eagles. It's time to start fresh. There are pieces on this team that you like. We'll see what they do with Jalen Hurts. They definitely need to draft better receivers. They have missed on a lot of potential receiver
They
talent.
have.
Jalen Reagor wasn't all that good last year.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see. I think this team has pieces. It's in a relatively weak division right now. And I'm curious to see who they get, and I'm curious to see how they deal with the Carson Wentz situation because that's kind of like the cloud around the Eagles right now is will they trade Carson Wentz? He has that huge contract, or will they try and keep him as a starter for next season? We'll see how they play that one out.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think that this Eagles team is in a really strange position because you're right. With this whole Carson Wentz situation, it's kind of a weird, like, are they going to keep him, trade him, like leave him on the bench? Because he doesn't want to be there if he's not the starter. But then you have the issue of where do you trade him to? I mean, the guy's owed like $30 million a year for the next
Right.
few years. So, he's owed a ton of money, and it's a tough situation for both him and the team trading for him, and the team interested in him because it's hard to shell out that much money, especially with the cap going down this next season.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be a tough situation. But I think, Trevor, they had to do this. And I think it would have been a mistake if they didn't, because then you put your players in a pretty compromised position because they don't want to play for this coach. But you also think that this coach is the best, for your team in terms of play calling or the future. But the players just don't want to play for him. And at the end of the
Right.
day, you had to make this choice so you have a coach that the players are motivated to play for. I think that's the most important thing that a head coach can do. I think that's overrated, having a head coach who is really good play caller, because I think you can have your coordinators do that for you, or at least
At
help.
Cliff Kingsbury, yes.
Yeah. Or at least you can have your coordinators help you out, right? That's what they're there for. They're not there to kind of like, sit there and be quiet. They're there to help you out with the play calling. Your job is to lead the team, change the culture, and tell them what the goals are. And I think that Peterson lost the locker room, making that near impossible. So this is a good move for them. You're right. Peterson will get a job somewhere else. I think it'll be a head coaching job, actually, because he has Super Bowl experience. And a lot of teams like that. And I think that he is still a good mind. He just lost the locker room, and he can't go back to Philly, sadly, because of that. So we'll see what happens.
I want to suggest one thing for Philly, and I think this guy is the perfect head coaching job. And he's I don't want to say he's the polar opposite of Peterson, but I think he is different in a lot of ways. And again, this guy is attractive for a lot
I
of
think
head
I knew you were going to
jobs.
say.
But I think Robert Saleh is the
Yeah.
perfect guy for this job, right? He's tough.
Mm,
Philadelphia, tough, gritty,
sure.
their fan base, extremely just an intimidating presence.
Yeah, they are.
And I think Robert Saleh fits that mold perfectly. I think the players would love to play for him. And again, he's not an offensive guru like other candidates like Brian Dable and Greg Roman of the Ravens, but
Yep.
this guy or Eric Bieniemy is another one, but this
Yep.
guy is tough. He's a Brian Flores. He gets guys to play for him. He gets them to believe in something. And I think for Philadelphia, that's a perfect fit.
Mm.
I think he would work well in many other situations as well, but I think especially this one, I think Robert Saleh would be a great hire for the Eagles, and I think Eagles fans would be happy with that as well. But that's just a suggestion of mine.
Yeah.
Polar opposite, now that I think about it, of Doug Pederson in many ways, but I really am high on Robert Saleh. I hope he gets a head coaching job.
No, yeah, I think there's little to no doubt that he will, Trevor. I know he was being flown to visit the Jets just recently. The Jets could really use someone like Salah. And I
Mhm.
think I don't want to get too deep into this because we have to move on, but it'll be really interesting to see who goes where for the head coaches in the NFL. And we will be sure, to discuss this. Obviously, I think Salah is going to be very attractive as a piece. I think Eric Bieniemy is kind of the prized possession, along with, I guess, Greg Roman and a few of those offensive
Mhm.
minds. I think that offensive-minded coaches kind of fare a little better just in general at this point in the NFL. It's kind of the way the NFL's gone, Trevor, at this moment. I think offenses, elite
Mhm.
offenses are just kind of the kind of what propel a team forward, in the current day and age in the NFL. But, who knows? I think some defensive coaches like, Sean McDermott, right? And a few others, Robert Saleh, hopefully getting a job, can also be really good and succeed as defensive minded head coaches. But we will see what happens with that. And Trevor, I wanted to move on from the NFL and I want to move on to college football because there was a national title game, Trevor, just this past week. And it went honestly kind of how I predicted, Trevor. It was a little bit more of a blowout than I originally thought. But it ended up being Alabama putting up 52 points on Ohio State to Ohio State's 24. And Trevor, we both figured Alabama was going to win, but I didn't really think they were going to win by this much. So, Trevor, do you feel like any thoughts on what happened this game? Anything you want to say just in general about the players of the teams?
Yeah, I just feel like so this is what happens, right?
Yeah.
Ohio State had a huge emotional win against Clemson,
Mm-hmm.
who, called them the 11th best team in college football. They beat them last year in the playoff. So for
Uh,
Ohio State, they put a lot of energy and effort into that Clemson game,
they
but it,
did.
it came at a price. Justin Fields was beat up. Trey Sermon, who wasn't hurt in that game, he got beat up on the first play of the Alabama game, and he ended up being a huge loss for Ohio State. But I think the moral of the story here is Alabama was just better in every
Mm,
way. I mean, Devontae Smith is a superstar. I don't love Mac Jones in the NFL, but he played an unbelievable football game.
he did.
36 of 45, 464 yards, 5 touchdowns, a 98 QBR, which is on a scale of 1 to 100. So a
Mm,
virtually perfect game for Mac Jones as well. And I mean, Nick Saban just whatever Nick Saban does, he just always has his guys ready to play. Alabama is never not prepared for a football game, and they just manhandled Ohio State. They just said we're a better football team and we know it.
yep.
Ohio State was a little bit beat up, and they just completely dominated Ohio State. The only reason I thought this game was going to be closer is
Yeah.
because I really liked what I saw from Ohio State's defensive line in the Clemson game. I thought them getting after
Yes.
Trevor Lawrence would fare well against Mac Jones, who isn't that mobile of a quarterback. I thought disrupting him could slow down Alabama a little bit, but whatever happened in the Clemson game did not happen in the
Nope.
Alabama
No,
game.
no,
Mac
it did
Jones
not.
was unstoppable. And I thought they had a really poor game plan on Devontae Smith. I didn't watch
Yeah.
this game too closely to analyze every play, but there was a play where Devontae Smith is matched up with an inside linebacker and he just runs right by him. For me, Devontae
Yeah.
Smith is a guy that you have. Devontae Smith is the one guy that I will not allow to beat us. I will take him out of the game, especially with Jalen Waddle playing on a broken ankle. I don't know what that was about. Him
Right.
limping after every play.
Man.
Um, if you can somehow find a way to just double, triple Devontae Smith, take away their best player, then we would, this would have been a different football game. But
Yeah.
he set the tone. He dominated. He was the star. And again, Alabama was just better. Simple as that.
Yeah, Trevor, I think we both knew Alabama was better, but again, I didn't really quite realize how much better. And for the people saying Ohio State was going to win, I'm like, how can you predict that? And I kind of liken it to the fact that the Browns are playing the Chiefs this Sunday, Trevor. And I'm a Browns fan, but I can't, as a person, really consciously say, the Browns, I think they're going to win the game. Like, you can want your team to win the game, right? You can hope your team's going to win the game. You can think it's going to be close, but to predict that the Browns are going to beat the Chiefs is just kind of silly. And I kind of felt that way about Ohio State. No, but like predicting that that's
It's
going to
not
happen.
silly.
What
Look, the Browns have a chance. They're the underdogs, but they
no,
have a
but
chance.
that's the thing. They have a chance. And Ohio State had a chance too, Trevor. Like, they were a really good football team,
They
right? Ohio
were.
State's
They
very
were.
talented, just like the Browns are a very talented team, very well coached. But the difference is these teams like Alabama and Kansas City, they're just on another level. And it's very hard to predict a loss for a team like Alabama. And, this team really doesn't make any mistakes. And I wanted to say one thing. As long as Nick Saban's there, this is going to continue. And I want to talk about the coaching staff because it's really marvelous what Nick Saban has done. He takes in these broken and lost coaches, right? Like
Sarkisian.
Steve Sarkisian, right? He's now going to become the head coach at Texas. And Trevor, he was a mess. He was a media disgrace after what happened at USC.
He had to go to alcohol rehab.
Yep, he was found, like, I think, being drunk at games or at practices and just on the
Mhm.
job. And it's like, you can't do that. But he goes to Bama, rehabilitates, rehabs in his image. And now look at him, Trevor. He's at an elite program, or at least a very prestigious program in Texas.
It's very prestigious.
So very
Yeah.
good for him. But like, the fact that he did the same thing with Lane Kiffin, right? Nick Saban did. He took in a guy who was kind of a joke in the national scale for running away from his team in the middle of the night, really. And then you have a guy now, Bill O'Brien is now the new offensive coordinator for Alabama for next season. So all these coaches, Trevor, I just love to see a program like Alabama so well disciplined and well coached that they can not only help the players, but help other coaches too, rehabilitate their careers and change their careers for the better. So I love seeing that. But in regards to this game, the offense is too good. As simple as that. The Ohio State defense just could not stop them. And the Ohio State offense, as I predicted, wouldn't be able to keep up. Fields didn't really have all that great of a game. He ran the ball kind of well, but he really didn't make all that much noise passing for under 200 yards and only one touchdown. It just wasn't enough, Trevor. Simple as that. And Devontae Smith only had to play one half to put up more yards than Justin Fields threw for an entire game. And that kind of sums up the game for me. It's entertaining to watch these players because they're going into the NFL, but like, I don't know. I think this playoff, as we said before, needs to be 8 teams to have a little more excitement surrounding,
Right.
these games, in my opinion. But, it was a fun game to watch these players, play well on offense for Bama. And it was just kind of electric seeing that happen. So it was fun to watch, I guess. But Trevor, I think, unless do you want to say anything else, or are
No,
we're okay to move on?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. There we
We
go.
get to this. This is a good one. I like this topic right
Yeah, so we have one more topic we wanted to discuss, and we wanted to take some time on it because this happened just today on Wednesday, and it was a massive deal, biggest trade of the season for the NBA, and probably the biggest trade in the last few seasons, Trevor. I mean, you might not see a bigger trade than this for a while, and this deal was a 4-team trade in the NBA where James Harden was traded from the Houston Rockets to the Brooklyn Nets, and James Harden was given to the Nets. The Nets gave up three first rounders. They also gave up 4 first-round pick swaps with the Rockets, so they'll trade if their pick is better, they'll give it to the Rockets in 4 different seasons. And then they also gave up Karis LeVert and Jarrett Allen and Taurean Prince. They gave up a ton in this deal. The Pacers got Karis LeVert along with the second rounder. The Cleveland Cavaliers got Jarrett Allen and Taurean Prince, and then the Rockets got Dante Exum, those first-round picks that I mentioned, another first from Cleveland, from Milwaukee in 2022, Dante Exum, and Victor Oladipo. So all in all, this trade, I know it's a lot to keep track of, a lot to keep up on, but a lot happened in this trade. And Trevor, I wanted to start off by asking you, was there a clear winner in this trade? Did everyone win? Did everyone lose? What's your take on these teams and who won and who lost?
Man, that's tough. Was there a clear winner?
Yeah.
It's too early to say who the clear winner is. Obviously, Brooklyn got the best player. James
Yep.
Harden is a top 10 NBA player. He's become very unlikable for how he handled his way out in Houston. I've lost a lot of respect for him personally, but I can't deny
Me too.
that he is one of the best offensive players in the NBA, one of the best offensive players in NBA history, in my opinion, from what I've seen. He's incredibly hard to guard. But honestly, all 4 of these teams did something right to a certain degree. I think all 4 of these teams won in their own way.
Yep.
I think Houston won a lot, maybe not as much as people are saying. You brought this up, Ryan, that a lot of their first-round picks are going to be late in the first round.
Yep.
So that could be, maybe not as sweet as they thought going into the deal. Hey, 4 first-round picks, but they're all going to be from 24 to 30. Not that's not necessarily true, but it very well
But
could
it's
end up.
like, yeah.
The more I think about it, I think Cleveland actually did an okay job in this trade. I don't love Jared Allen. I don't love Torian Prince. I don't love the idea that they gave up a first round pick, but Ryan, you're a Cavs fan. You kind of talked some sense into me, so I don't think it's that bad of a deal for them. I like what Indy did. I
Yep.
really do think Karis LeVert is a very underrated player in the NBA. He, in my opinion, is almost as good as Victor Oladipo, and they get a second round pick as well, which isn't all that much. I thought they got a little bit more when they used the words Karis LeVert or packaged Karis LeVert in the trade. So I assume they got at least multiple picks, not just one second rounder.
Oh.
And I think Houston, this was a huge trade for them, and here's why. Houston gave up a ton of future assets to Oklahoma City, right? When
Mhm.
they traded for Russell Westbrook.
Yep.
So
Yep.
to get all those future assets back and more, and to get a couple nice young players, or at least one nice young player in Karis LeVert, or wait,
They got Victor Oladipo,
he's
Karis
now on
LeVert.
Indy. Sorry, to get
Karis
Victor
LeVert went to Indy.
Oladipo.
Yes,
Yeah, to
yes.
get Victor Oladipo.
Mhm.
So I like this Rockets roster. It's a borderline playoff roster in the West. They're a little bit deeper and a little bit more well-rounded than last year. So we'll see how it works out. I think every team in their own way won this trade. Brooklyn, we'll see. Anything short of a championship for the Nets, then this trade is a bust. But I'm a little bit worried. Final point on this before I hand it off to you, Ryan. I'm
Yeah, of
just a
course.
little bit worried about this locker room dynamic.
Hmm.
Kyrie Irving is not playing games because he doesn't want to. Like, I don't even know what the deal is with
It's
him.
really weird.
James Harden is fat and out of shape and loves going to strip clubs and, basically trashed an NBA team to the media, which I haven't heard a player do in ages.
Yeah, that was.
Kevin Durant is a little bit sensitive. If you attack Kevin Durant, he'll take it personally. So we'll see how this fares. And there's only one basketball to go around. I
Yep.
think Brooklyn has a lot to figure out. So I wouldn't be surprised if this takes some time to gel. But I do think every team ultimately won this trade in their own way.
Trevor, I want to say one thing, and they better not take too much time to figure this out. I mean, I suppose the regular season doesn't really matter for a team like the Nets, but they are 6-6 going into tonight. So it's not like they have all that great of a record, to play around with. So, we'll see what happens with Brooklyn. I think it's funny that Kevin Durant is the most engaged, and seems like the most normal out of these guys. It's just kind of funny
Yeah.
to me because he looked like kind of the biggest clown in Golden State. And now look at him. He's like the most sane guy out of all the superstars on this team. But Trevor, about this trade more specifically, I think this trade was good for every single team. And I think, honestly, the two main teams in this deal made out the worst. It's kind of funny. I think that the Rockets, to me, they did a good job. I like Oladipo. I like all the firsts they got. Hopefully they draft well because, to me, as you said, I think a lot of them will be late, especially for the next 3 or 4 years. And I think that's going to be hard because I think that it's really important. People have this fascination with first round picks. To me, it's more important to get young, established talent, like Karis LeVert, like Jared Allen, players that are already
I have
talented.
established talent in Jared Allen. How about
Well,
established size? We'll go with that.
players that what they can do and you know how to evaluate
Okay,
them.
it's a
You
good way to
don't
work.
you don't know how to evaluate the 26th pick in the draft. You
No,
just
you
don't
don't.
because you don't know who you're going to draft. You don't know how good they're going to be in the NBA. So I think that it's important, to realize that getting actual young players is worth more than picks. Now the Rockets, you say, did replenish their assets, so I do like that. But I wish they kept LeVert instead of getting Oladipo. I think LeVert is younger. I think he's a better player, or he's as young. And he's under contract for 2 more seasons than Oladipo is. Oladipo is an expiring contract, so he could very well leave. And I don't think he's as good coming off his injury as he was before. And I think him and LeVert are
Mhm.
pretty much. I think LeVert's a little better, or they're at least even players. So I think that the Rockets did okay. I think the Nets did okay. They're probably going to go to the NBA Finals. Hopefully they should win. I mean, you better win with this roster, but they're really top heavy now as expected, and Kyrie's just MIA. I don't want to get into that too much tonight, Trevor, but he's just kind of doing whatever he wants, and I really don't know why the team's allowing him to do that.
Right.
Like it's really strange. I don't think he wants to play basketball anymore. It's really weird. Like he doesn't seem like he cares at all about a sport that is his job. So it's a little weird to me. That's another story, but it'll be interesting to see who handles the ball and how much, because I don't think Kevin Durant's gonna be able to handle the ball really much at all when Harden and Kyrie are in. They're just gonna hold the ball the whole time.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see. But I think the Pacers did really well. LeVert in a second for Oladipo, I really love. I think that's fantastic. because LeVert's under contract for 2.5 seasons. And he's young. I think he fits in with that roster well, gives him a nice scoring boost. And I think the Cavs did well too. They gave up a late first and it oft injured Dante Exum for Torian Prince, a guy who could play the 3 and the 4 that Cleveland needs. Cleveland needs wing guys like that. And they added Jared Allen, a 22-year-old center who, he's very young. He seemingly is going to be the Drummond replacement. Because Drummond's an expiring contract at $27 million this year, which is astronomical. And Jared Allen, Trevor, and I'll make this point very fast, but you're right. He doesn't have a lot of basketball talent. Trevor has told me about this. He said he doesn't think Jared Allen has a lot of basketball skill, which is kind of true. He doesn't really have a post moves, he doesn't have a jump shot, he doesn't shoot threes or the mid range, but he does 3 things well. He plays defense, right? He makes dunks and around the basket and he rebounds. Those are the 3 things that Cleveland needs out of a center. They don't need him to take 16 shots a game like Andre Drummond does. They need him to play defense, to guard, the guys who get in the paint. Cleveland has a number 1 defense so far on this young season, and they need guys who can defend the paint, right? Because their guards are a little bit weaker on defense, although they've taken steps this season. And they need guys who are efficient and don't take a lot of shots at the center position, which Allen does. He only takes about 5 shots a game and shoots about 68%. And he hits his free throws, shooting about 75% from the free throw line as opposed to Drummond about 50. So I feel like he's an improvement just solely because he takes less shots and knows his role, and he's a lot younger. So it's a good young piece for Cleveland to get for a late first and an oft-injured guard. So all in all, I think all these teams won, but I think that the Pacers and the Cavs kind of won out more because they didn't have to give up a lot and got solid foundational pieces for their teams.
I think the Rockets won this trade the most as of today.
Okay.
Indiana didn't get that much for Oladipo. I like LeVert, but when they used the word packaged, I was like, all right, they're going to get 2 firsts. But they got 1 second-round pick.
Okay.
I mean, Oladipo today is a slightly better player than LeVert. We'll see in 3 years. It's close. But I think Indiana did okay. They didn't really lose. Cleveland, it's a very I don't know. I think that aspect of the trade is just kind of like not even worth talking about. And then Houston has a ton of future assets, and we'll see how they draft. It's a similar situation out of Oklahoma City. We'll see how Oklahoma City can draft.
Sure.
And Houston has a good team as is. I actually like their roster. And obviously Brooklyn has 3 superstars, so we'll see how that plays out. But with that, Ryan, that will conclude this podcast unless you have anything else to throw in at the end. But
no, sir, that is it. That's all good for me.
Perfect. Thank you guys, and we will see you next week.
See you later.